Okay, good morning. I'm Donato Masci from Florence, Italy. Company name is Studio Sound Service. This is the logo. Um, First of all, I want to thanks to Jarmo and Lars Olof from Genelec for inviting me there. Sweden is a great country with great music and an acoustic tradition, so it's really I'm really honored to be there. Today, I will do two presentations. The first one is the evolution of music production studios from commercial recording studio to the project production studio. And I will try to talk about what happens in the music industry. So from what happens about music studios, probably they are going to be smaller and smaller, and so what could be the trend? What could be the evolution of them during the time in the next future, probably. In the second presentation, I will talk about the acoustic design for object audio reproduction, in particular multi-channel immersive audio like Dolby Atmos design for studios, cinema mixing studios, and in particular this new kind of facility called Dolby Atmos Home Entertainment, which will be the studio where the broadcast Atmos for broadcast and for TV in general will be mixed. And there will be a great evolution, maybe for some reason better, for some reason worse than before. There are a lot of problems to solve, a lot of loudspeakers in the room, which is not the best for us, acoustician, of course. It's like a nightmare. But we have to try to solve this and to make the experience more immersive. While luckily for music we remain on 2 channels, the old stereo for us, and we're happy about this from a certain point of view. Who we are? First of all, I have to thank to my team, Cecilia Torracchi, which is a civil engineer, who works with me, and my partner, and Giacomo Arcangeli. Arcangeli is the new guy. We are a small team of 3 people, different extraction. I'm a physicist, she's a civil engineer, and Giacomo is graduated in Salford in audio acoustics. And they give me an hand to prepare these slides for you and support me in every kind of work we do in the last year. So thank to all them, nice collaborator. I show you some project we did in the last few years, in the last 10 years. In the last 10 years we designed more than 150 studios, in particular in Italy, but also around from 2013 we came outside Italy. We go outside Italy, maybe working for post-production, Fox Studios and other kind of studios in Germany, England, Switzerland a lot, and now we are working in Romania, Poland, and for other things, for architectural acoustic, we go very far from from Europe too. Strange places, nice places. So it's not only about recording studio. We are acousticians, so of course we are born in 1983 with my mentor Fabrizio Giovannozzi, working only in the recording studios, but now we work in all fields of acoustics, so churches, auditorium, theater. Of course, I'm a musician, so I like music acoustics, and I think is the thing that we do at best, of course. Let's start our presentation. How are the recording studio designed? Of course, we have an hour, so we cannot explain all our expertise in an hour. But I want to show you the instruments that we have during the years and the way we have to design. What are the things done? What we can do really that. Sometimes there is a sort of black magic between our work, so I want to to show you that the things are not so strange, and I want to show you what was the evolution during the time and what we have now. First of all, the things that I have to say is that sometimes when we work in usually when we work in architectural acoustics, we work inside a team of architects, engineers, and everything. And we deal about acoustics, but we work like consultants. When we work in recording studio design, we are the studio designer. So, in particular, we deal with everything, almost everything. This is not true that we design everything, but of course it's impossible, for example, to know that in recording studios we have a problem with a noise coming from the air conditioning system. So we deal about every kind of design, we supervise every kind of design, and so we have a lot of things to do, of course. So it's not only about isolation and acoustic treatment, but a lot of things. Last but not least is the static part that is, for me, is quite important because we always remember that these are creative rooms where the people have to be creative, so they have to feel at ease. It's not only a beautiful studios in general terms, but the people, the musicians have to feel at ease there. So what is the best maybe for a metal guitar player is not the same for the DJ. But our work is to find the right way to make them feel at ease and produce their own music as well. So we have two main instruments. Of course, we have a lot of formulas to calculate the resonance of the panels, the resonance of the absorption, the Helmholtz resonator, the membrane resonator, and everything. But if you want to study the acoustics of an entire room, now we have, of course, the acoustic CAD software that could help us, but not so much for this purpose, because we usually use this kind of software like Ease for auditorium, theaters, and so on, and there are quite nice instrument to simulate the mid-high frequency, but not so well to simulate the low frequency, which is the thickest part of our job for the recording studios. So we have another kind of simulation, the FEM, finite element method, which is a kind of simulation that came from research and development. And it is quite tricky to use because it's not a commercial software, it's a research software, so you have to find your simulation. And this could be helpful for low frequency. Then I will show you something that it could be nice to look about this kind of software and simulation that could be done. So, as a rule, until now, the acoustician, like me, usually use basic physics formulas, analytical formulas for resonation, etc., geometry, experience, and use some standard design. What are standard design? Are some studio design that are developed during time and they are reproposed in several different situations. So this could be nice, but for example, now that we have some problem because the rooms are getting smaller and smaller, we have to change something. We have to find new solution, and we need some instrument that helps us to find the best solution in every case. And it's a tricky part. So, very fast. Two philosophical systems from the 60s. There are two ways of thinking. Some of the sound engineers thought that the recording studio could be similar to an anechoic room, so very a lot of definition, very small reverberation time, but of course it's not, because it will be alienating to work for hours. And some of other people thought that the best recording studios have to sound like a typical domestic room. But it is proved that it is impossible. For example, if you place a typical domestic room in Sweden, in the northern Europe, is quite different. It's so different from a typical domestic room in the south of Europe, where we use masonry, so the reverberation time, especially at lower frequency, is quite different. So, of course, this is a place where you can listen and work in a more neutral way. So, fortunately, luckily, we have this kind of standards and guideline that gives us some mask for reverberation, frequency response, etc. And we use like a good guideline. Even if in the last few years, there is a trend, especially for electronic dance music, to have a lower reverberation time, especially for mid-low frequency. So we usually follow the AES standard, but sometimes that reverberation time is correlated with the volume of the room, but sometimes we need to be lower a little bit. So this is a timeline from the last century. You can see a lot of electroacoustics checkpoint, let's call it like this. And of course, the history of recording studio design starts in the 1950, generally, with the beginning of the music industry, of course. And the first control rooms was placed in a not likely place, probably, usually in the corner of the rooms. And the first important improvement was the introduction of the stereo, where the control room have to be. And so the first checkpoint is to have a symmetrical control room between left to right. So this is the first improvement. Then we go in the 60s with Tom Midley, who was one of the most important recording studio designer. And with the introduction of stereo and the music industry, new music industry, we need new acoustics for new control rooms. And there was a very famous interview of Tom Midley in which he said that his best listening experience has been on a roof on a semi-anechoic room of a house, is a sort of semi-anechoic room, during a party after a day of recording on the roof. There was, of course, the roof was completely reflective, and there was a house close to this roof. So they have only a wall where they put the speakers and the roof. So two wall, two surfaces reflective, and the rest of the space is completely absorptive because it is a free field. And he explained that experience like the best one he ever had, and tried for all his life to replicate this kind of experience. First of all, he understood that you have to absorb not only mid-high frequency, but introduce the bass trap, the first bass traps that are similar to these are plywood glued with some absorption material like rock wool or similars, hanging from the ceiling and generally placed in the back of the room or in the ceiling. Hanging and choosing the tilting angle. He told that the best tilting angle is about 45 degrees for the back, and for the ceiling it have to be aimed through the speaker. So the guideline of this design is left-right symmetry, no reflection from behind with bass trap, no reflection from the ceiling with bass trap, a reflective front and a flush mount of the speaker, which is very important, a side wall, partly reflective and diffused, and a shorter reverberation time, even at low frequency than before. This kind of solution are still used. A lot of acousticians use all over the world this kind of bass traps and put it in the corners or in the back or in the ceiling or so on. I prefer to avoid the plywood and I prefer to use only the baffle of absorption material, but there are so many studies about this, but it's my experience and I prefer to do this. So in the 78 there is a great improvement because the people could analyze room acoustic in a useful way. So comb filters can be noted, and there are a lot of debates about the fact that the front wall, the first reflection, generates these comb filters, and Tommy Dre begins to cover the studio front with absorption, and Chip and Don Davis create the Lede live end dead end, which is another great improvement. Probably it is based on a psychoacoustic theory, and this theory is one of the most debated still now. What happens is that the front of the studio has some absorption with absorptive material, and the back one has covered with reflective surfaces, in particular with diffusers. So was introduced the Schroeder diffuser on the back. So next step in 84, reflection-free zone, RFZ. This is another improvement of the LED principle, but instead of covering the front wall with absorption material, the reflection-free zone want to cover the front wall with reflective material, but tilted, vertically tilted and horizontally tilted, in order to create a sort of reflection-free zone close to the listening position. Of course, in this way, in such way, the first reflection came across this zone and goes to the back. This is quite a great improvement because it is based only on the geometry. Of course, this works from 500 Hertz to 5,000. So in the region of the perception, that is quite the best one, best sensitivity for the human ear, but is not full band, because to have this kind of reflection, the wall at lower frequency have to be huge and very thick. So this works, but is not a universal thing for all the region of the audible frequencies, of course. Of course, the diffuser on the back was improved, was okay, and this is a great improvement too. You can see some picture, and the front wall was a lot of wood was used in this kind of studios, so the reverberation time was not so low. And this is a debate. Some people prefer a lower one, and some people prefer a brighter one. It probably depends on the music they produce too. So the standard is okay with the science, but when we talk about music, luckily or unluckily, we have to find something to talk about. Another great improvement is what happens in the BBC, where Bob Walker make the controlled image design (CID). Is not so famous this thing, but it is quite important in my point of view because it's the first typical design that works with floor speakers, not flush-mounted speakers. Until this 90, all the design was made only for flush-mounted speakers, and this is very important because now we use a lot of near fields, a lot of small speakers, and a few big monitors. And this could be helpful. It is quite similar to reflection-free zone, and it was used only for BBC because they need a design of studio that works with freestanding monitors as BBC required. The other thing is you can notice the geometry, which is similar to reflection-free zone. There are some absorption surfaces and some reflective surfaces, and the aim is to make the reflection goes down to the listener, but not damp it directly. So having a longer reverberation time, like it could be in a domestic room, is not really damped. Yeah, this photo is not so good. Probably the English way. They're very functional, maybe not so beautiful, but and it is like office for BBC, so it was really not so. Of course, it's not Italian design, but it works very well. Last, probably, is the return of Tom Midley after Lede that destroys his way of thinking and everything. Tom Midley, Philip Newell, and a lot of other famous acousticians make this new way of design called NonEnvironment. That probably is still the state of the art. It's difficult to say these words because everyone has its own way to do the recording studio design, and probably most of us use an hybrid solution between different things. For example, I really like the idea. I generally use the NonEnvironment, but I really like something about the RFZ. Because I'm very linked to geometrical way to do the reflections, and I use some principle of the RFZO also for cinema, the mixing theaters, because I can put some reflection in a such way that the first reflection doesn't happen. So I can raise the reverberation time without raising the first reflection. And this is nice to have. Of course, the idea is the first Tom Midley idea. So it's a sort of semi-acoustic chamber with the front and the floor reflective, and the rest of the room with absorption. Having the floor having the ceiling with absorption is quite useful, and it's quite common for every design. This is quite true because we have the floor that is quite reflective every time. So to contrast the flutter echoes and every other stuff that will be formed by a floor reflective and a ceiling reflective, maybe parallel to the floor, most of this design have the absorption on the ceiling, or a reflective ceiling but very tilted in order to avoid any flutter echo from the floor. What changes between these different design is the place where to put the low frequency absorption, and is the feeling, and is very linked to the way in which we listen to the music, so the perception of the sound, having an absorptive wall, front wall, or having a reflective one changes a lot the perception of the sound. So it's not only about frequency response or reverberation time, it's what you feel that is quite different, and it is proved that different artists, different music prefer different listening between these. So this is something about non-environment. You can see flash-mounted speakers. You can see absorption with this bass strap on the back, on the side, and on the ceiling. A lot of absorption, and the room are so damped. So what we have now, what are the instruments that can help us to find new solution, maybe also for smaller rooms, because it's easy if the client gives, okay, I have 100 square meter place, let's do anything you want. Okay, what is the height? 5 meters. Okay, perfect. I have no problem. I replicate something that I know, and I'm really happy to do this really fast. We can choose the color of the fabric, and we are okay. But the problem is where we have a small room, and this happens every time in broadcast facilities with DJs. If you work in urban places in the cities, we have small roof, a lot of problems about insulation, isolation of the places of the rooms, and everything. What helps could be the FEM simulation. In this screenshot, I show what happens in the acoustic field if I insert the same porous material. Is like a pillar of absorption, porous absorption, in the back, in the corner, or in the side of a room. This is really fine because every one of us in the first lesson of acoustic design, not acoustic design, maybe acoustics in general, you can learn that every material has its own alpha acoustic coefficient that absorbs different kind of frequency. But what happens is that at lower frequency, the acoustic field is not continuous, it's discrete. We physicists talk about quantization of field, like other field of physics, of course, because the energy is not continuous in the frequency, but is focused on some frequency, the room modes in particular. And of course, the acoustician knows very well the room modes, and there is an analytical formula to calculate them for a rectangular room. So every acoustician still now can calculate the room modes for a rectangular room and make some maths to organize the absorption in the corners at that frequency he likes to absorb and everything. But the problem is that for non-rectangular room, we don't have any analytical formula. So if you would like to understand what is the spatial behavior of a room mode and what are the frequency, what are the deep, what are the maxima and the minima in the room, you have to put in the FEM simulator or in another kind of simulator. But this works, and this is quite easy to give you this result. But the most important thing is that with this software, you can understand what happens before the absorption and after the absorption. And this is fun, because what happens after the absorption in the room? The room modes changes. There are some frequency that are quite close, we call degeneration, from some room frequency that are quite close each other, then changes a lot, changes in frequency, and changes their special behavior. This is very nice to see, especially with a lot of absorption. The acoustic field changes a lot. So with this tool, is not only useful to see what happens before, thinking that the room has rigid surfaces and knowing what happens before the treatment. But with this software, you can know what happens after the treatment, which way the room modes changes, and everything. Of course, this is very, very difficult to use because you must know not only the acoustic absorption of the wall, but the impedance of the wall. You are going to do a library of this kind of solution. This is not a commercial way to do software because they are not used only for acoustic design. So there is no library like absorption material or something else. So we are working hard to do our experience and improve this kind of simulation. But this could be the real future. And in this graph, you can see how the absorption material, the absorption coefficient of the same pillar of acoustic absorption material changes if you place in the corner or in the side. And this shows how the things changes in a room, because if this material was put in the corner, it catches some room modes. If it's put on the side, it catches another and leaves another alone. So it's very, very important to study in a such way. And it gives us the sound pressure distribution in the room. For example, this is nice to see an untreated room and a treated room. How much is homogeneous the sound pressure level? So, for example, this is rectangular, non-rectangular room. You can see the acoustic pressure and the SPL of each room mode. You can plot several modes. You can plot a video of changing the room modes in the frequency and a lot of other stuff. But it's quite difficult to use. And I have to say that we don't use for every project, of course, because it's quite tricky. So let's go to simpler things now. Let's think about what can we say some fast thoughts about recording studios and their classification now. Yes, we have top studios. What we mean about top studio, maybe a big console, some big monitors, a large space, some live rooms, etc. So this is the idea that remains focused on the top studios that you can sell to other people, you can rent every day. The project studio is generally is a sort of personal studio of a musician, of an artist that makes music, is a sort of office to make music. It's a smaller one, maybe it doesn't have any console, it doesn't have many main monitors, but could be interesting and nice too. Some word about home studio. This is a home studio of Damian Lazarus, a famous DJ from England. And of course it could be a mess like this, full of things, or it could be very easy. But the fact that it's in home, could be strange, because I have a lot of clients of mine that have a very nice studio at their home with consoles and so home is not really a definition. Probably a residential studio is better, and you understand what I mean. So, a few thoughts about these things. The A point: if you do not record anymore in your studio, can we still talk about recording studio? This is very important. I talked with you yesterday at dinner. This is nice because 90%, 80% of my clients now didn't use a live room anymore. In Italy, when you talk about recording studio di registrazione, the people talk about the control room, not the live room. If you go to UK and you say recording studio, they think about the live room. The control room is another room. But the control room now doesn't control nothing anymore because there is no live room. So can we talk about studios or control rooms? Probably we have to talk about production studio, electronic production studio, music production studio, and this, in fact, is a control room, but without controlling nothing. Other simple point, of course, there are a lot of people that do build a studio in their home, but the home word is misleading. There is this trend, DJs, every DJ producer have their own studio that basically is not equipped with a huge console or something else, but maybe have a good listening monitoring system, and is quite different from a traditional music studio. So some people works only in their home studio, maybe famous artists, and then use them to produce their own music without going in a top studio. And in other situations, they try to do their best in their home studio and finalize the project in the top studios. So what is the real difference now between the project studio and the top studio? Let's see some difference about the equipment. If there is no console, it would be okay anymore, in my opinion, because of course you can mix in the box. Maybe it's not the best, I understand, but you can use a good summing mixer, you can use preamp, you can use a lot of things, and of course the console is one of the most important equipment that is the main difference between a top studio or a project studio. But if there are no big monitors, this could be different, especially for the lack of the speaker's flash mount, that in my opinion is a huge improvement for freestanding near fields, even if in the new near fields are sounding better and better. We don't say the brand, but it's okay. 2 words about costs. 2 words about cost. I expressed the cost in euro, sorry. I hope you understand something. Okay, in this slide, I insert some audio equipment cost from 1995 to 2014, and I put something about the music industry, Italian music industry. In the 1995, to win the golden disc, you have to sell 50,000 discs. Now, to win the golden disc, you have to sell a half, and probably nobody will win it so easily in comparison to 1995. This is nice because I look at the cost of the equipment. In the 1995, probably the console were quite more expensive than now, that a few console is lower in price. And this is very important for the final audio equipment cost. And probably now is half than in 1995. But what happens is that the project studio and the home studio begins to work, and with 25 to 100,000 euros, you can have a very nice project studio. So if we add also the studio construction costs, we can see something interesting. While the electronic in the audio equipment changes the things in the cost, in the final costs, of course the physics is the same. So if we talk about the same way to treat the studios until now, we can see that the things doesn't change anymore, doesn't change between 15, 20 years ago. Probably the costs are quite the same to build a top studio. So this is tricky because now the daily income is changed. Daily income is changed, and it is quite tricky to do a top studio. This is one of the reasons why the top studios are closing, even in important countries like UK, USA, etc. And the aim is to go with smaller studios without a lot of equipment, but useful for different kind of music and etc. And probably the project studio idea is a sort of main office of the sound engineer, which is quite strange because in the past you have to rent the top studio to different sound engineers, and now everyone has its own. What you can see is that probably the project studio is the best catch also for the daily income, the costs, and everything. And this is the reason why probably we are doing them very, very often, and the top studios are becoming a few. Okay. Probably the only reason why now is very important the top studio, could be important the top studio, is an orchestral recording. Because nobody has now, in Italy, for example, we have 3 or maybe 4 orchestral recording studios in all Italy, and only me from 90, only our company from the 90s, we design about 300 studios. So it is strange, this fact. Probably classical music, but also film scoring and every other field of music that needs the orchestral needs a big recording studio. And in that case, should be helpful to do a big control room and everything you need. I will show some case studies about my experience, starting from the smallest one, making this road from home to top. This is a bass player close to Florence. He's a producer too, and this is a sort of office where he works, when he can record, arrange, and make everything he needs until the final mix if he wants, if he needs. He plays with a famous Italian singer. And of course, there is no console, but there is an analog sound mixer, preamplifier. Every time they changes the outboard and everything. I will just show it. Nice design. This is a small, very small recording studio. Is only 2.5 meters 8. It was designed for a young engineer, and I'm really happy that this young engineer is growing, and now is working with major labeled artists. So it was a good starting point for his career, and I hope that in the future he needs a bigger studio too. That is a studio. This is a studio for composer. Federico De Robertis is a film music composer. He works with Gabriele Salvatore's director. He's one of the few Italian Oscar winner directors. And he composed music in stereo, and then he have also a 5.1 system to check it out. And there is also a recording studio, a recording one. Yeah, what we see, this is a binary amplitude diffuser. So it's a panel that works like an absorber and a diffuser in the same time. In a few words. Okay, we go on. This is an electronic music studio, of course. This Vinay is 2 brothers from the north of Italy, in the top 100 DJs, number 37. As you can see, no outboard, only computer, 2 speakers, and a sound card, and nothing else. but good listening, good environment to listen. This is another DJ, Damian Lazarus, very famous from the UK. He has a chalet in close to Florence and want to make treatment with a mess inside because it's completely the opposite. So when we talk about electronic music, you have to check that it's very different from EDM to many other stuff. So this is nice to see. When you say DJ, it's very different. A lot of stuff, a lot of pedals working. This is a brand new, is finished in the last few days in close to Milan. You can visit if you go to AES with 1234 and 7380 Genelec speakers. Particular design because he likes white, you know. We use some Korean slot with LED inside to do this kind of job, and so we try to combine some design with this kind of facility. A lot of absorbers. The front wall is very massive in concrete, where we put the speakers. So you have a very massive front, and all around there is a lot of absorption. So we go on. This is a project studio with small, big monitors and small consoles. So they want to be bigger. There are rockers, so black one. And the difference at the end of the year, I'm crazy by the difference of the different design, of course. This is another studio close to Padua. He's another guy that's starting not from scratch, but is so young, and then is growing up faster and faster. Now he changes the nucleus with a Neve console, so it is working. Yeah. A nice live room, not so high, but it is useful to work with several people. This is another small environment close to Florence, 5.1. The control room is not so big, but the live room is amazing because it is built in an ancient Tuscany villa with 7-meter high ceiling, and this sounds so well also for classical music. The sound is very warm. A lot of wood inside, and yeah, they record a lot of things about classical music, quartet, piano, and everything. This is another studio. This is jazz-based or jazz-oriented. And in the recording room, a nice recording room, about 60, 70 square meter, we have 3 ISO booths with glass. So this is done for the interplay of the musician that could see each other playing in different rooms if they want, or playing together if the sound engineer wants. And this is quite nice with a lot of wood. It sounds quite bright, yeah. So not very long reverberation time, but it's quite bright. This is one of the first top studios that was nominated in Resolution as Best Audio Facility. This is in the Tuscany coast by Gianni Bini, a DJ, but also an Italian pop music producer. So we have a lot of things now, duality, a lot of stuff, 2 big monitors, and etc. So this is a top studio, really a top studio with not so big live room, but is functional with piano, and he has 2 or 3 ISO booths to play with. But the control room is important. This is the second that was nominated for Resolution magazine. Is the Garage Studio in Arezzo, close to Florence, and SSL and 1034 Genelec. It sounds very good, and it has a massive concrete front. Let's stay in touch. Good flight. And this is really this was realized some years ago, and Fabrizio Simoncioni goes collaborate. He's a famous Italian sound engineer working in USA too, and collaborate in this studio. Now he's working in another studio called Depot. I will show. This is Mulinetti in Genoa. This is a top studio built in a apartment, so not so high. It was really tricky to insert everything. It is quite big. It's a 45 square meter, the control room, and he has 3 live rooms all around. Not so big, but he could record different things all together. He works for jazz music. He's the sound engineer of several Italian artists and also some people from USA. In particular, Moody Blues. I don't know if in Italy are not so famous, but I know that they are really famous band. Yeah, no flash mount. There was a problem with flash mount. We don't have enough. The flash mount will weight so much in that apartment, so we cannot flash mount the speaker in the front. So we try to find several solutions to do them sounding better as possible, and was really nice to understand that it would be possible, even if I'm a maniac of flash mount, if I can. Live room, it is nice to have the interplay between a live room and another, so the musician can see each other playing. This depot in this situation is the same, 2 windows in the side, but these are wide-angle photos, but the windows are not flat, they are tilted, so no reflection between them, and you can see from a live room to another if you want. And the control room is perfectly symmetrical. This is an old-style studio. Brand new old style. So here are some orchestral room. These are 2 orchestral rooms from the south of Italy. The first is the International Sound in Conversano, Bari. This was designed by my old mentor, Fabrizio Giovannozzi, who was the founder of our company, who lived in 2012. We worked together some years, and he taught me everything about this job. So a big sounding room, 100 square meters, so up to 70 musicians. And the other one that was rented now 2 months from Beirut artists and a lot of other artists, maybe someone that works for Deutsche Grammophon and other, to make 3D recording. In that big room is about 120 square meter orchestral room with some variable acoustic from the ceiling. So you can change some early reflection, not really the reverberation of the room, but you can change the first reflections and the feeling of the room. So, a few conclusions about this first part of my presentation. It is difficult to establish the difference between different types of studio. We know, top, home, and project. So the things are changing during these years. The general trend is room getting smaller. You understand. There are a few money to spend in that rooms, but no, everybody. The trend is that everybody, every musician, every engineer has its own studio. Another important thing is that recording quality suffer, mainly due to the lack of big monitors, even if analog console can be easily replaced by some mixer and every other kind. But the listening experience could be a little worse than before. So what I have to suggest is that we, acoustic designer, have to change something to adapt to this phenomenon, to the room getting smaller and smaller, maybe with new way of design recording studios, and probably using new stuff, like, of course, modern calibration, as Genelec has, GLM, and other stuff. But probably in the future should be important to have some active reverberation control systems that could be useful. They are like speakers that absorbs the sound, especially for lower frequency, that are developed by several companies all around the world now. And probably this is the next step, because of course it's difficult to control the acoustic field in a small room. So maybe technology could help us in this field. Okay? So thank you, and let's start in a few minutes with the second presentation. Okay? This second presentation, I'm talking about acoustic designs for object audio reproduction, especially for Dolby Atmos design. Even in this field, a brief history of multi-channel audio. This is a small critic for video, because of course, probably multi-channel audio was not really accepted in the music industry. So probably multi-channel audio is born probably with the Dolby Surround in the 70s, not for the video, but for all audio contents, also music, but it was developed mainly for the video. And probably now these new other steps are in particular for this. Let's see the same key point and milestones in the last century. 1927, introduction of sound with film. In the 1930s, the sync sound on disc. In the 40s, there is the theatrical acoustics, improved speaker design, multi-track recording, steerable replay. In the 50s to the 60s, there are magnetic stripping of film allowed, multi-channel playback, and surround channels up to 5. In the 70s, there is the first real improvement in the multi-channel audio. Dolby released the noise reduction for post-production and film, and a cost-effective encoding and distributing mixes with 3 screen channel and a mono surround channel. This is the Dolby Surround, where 2 analog tracks recorded in analog in the film will be encoded and divided in 4 tracks, left, center, right, and surround. So this is the main, the first and clever solution for multi-track and multi-channel reproduction. In the 80s, Dolby SR noise reduction and THX with certification programs. And in the 90s, there is a second huge step with the introduction of cinema digital sound. Of course, this cinema digital sound was compressed, so was not so good as expected. But for the first time, we have 5.1 discrete digital channels. So the main difference between the first Dolby Surround was that the surround channel has a wider frequency response, and there is a discrete central channel for voice and everything. And there was also a channel for LFE with bass management that the subwoofer have to do two things, the bass management and the LFE. So these are major improvement. But what happens in the last years? There is a lot of things to do and to say. First of all major companies collaborate to this association, Digital Cinema Initiatives, that released the version 1.0 of its digital cinema system specification. In particular, this document describes overall system requirement and specification for digital cinema, and it's based on many SMPTA, ISO, EIS, a lot of standards. And the goal is to do this digital cinema package, DCP. And this is a good and a dramatic improvement than before, because with this package we have to go up to 16 channels of audio at 24 bits per sample, 38 kilos or 96 kilos, uncompressed. So quantity, but also quality, changes a lot. In 2010, the DCI specification 1.1, and in 2007, excuse me, in 2010, the Dolby Surround 7.1. Dolby take this DCP and use this 7.1 discrete channel at uncompressed. Yeah, this seems to be not really a huge improvement between the 5.1, but from a commercial point of view, this was really, really important, because more than 120 titles and 4,000 screens was equipped in less than 3 years since its launch. So, from a certain point of view, it was really, really amazing. And it changes a lot of things. So now the chain is completely digital. So the digital projector, the sound processor, in particular CP750, and 7 discrete channels plus the LFE. During this time, Dolby does a lot of things, try to do different configuration, and not only Dolby, of course, other companies. Let's think that DTS changes a little bit, so there are no real competitor of Dolby in this field after 2010 and something. So in 2012, there was released the first version of Dolby Atmos as a next generation of sound for cinema. And it was introduced like a 3D audio system, but was not really a 3D audio, because the audio can come from the floor, for example. But it's an immersive system, and it was made by beds and object of sound. In 2012, there was released the DCI specification 1.2, and now what happens? The Dolby Atmos that was born only for cinema, it is going also in our home. So it's not only cinema, but broadcast. So Dolby released a new way to do studios for cinema, for broadcast production. And it is called Dolby Atmos Home Entertainment, as a guidance for equipping professional mixing and encoding room for Dolby Atmos Home Entertainment. So what happens now? This 3D audio stuff goes in broadcast, in Netflix, in Sky, in Fox, and many other in 2018. But what happens for music? Nothing, probably, in the next years, but we shall see. 2 words about Dolby Atmos. There was 2 critical elements that could improve the 7.1 experience. One is the sound originating overhead, and the other is that the sound can originate by discrete point in the space. So there was introduced the audio object. that are real point in the space, so you can give them some metadata that are basically some special coordinates. And this object can move, of course, in the room. But the funny part is that the idea that you have so many speakers, but the sound doesn't generate from a series of speakers, but as a combination of someone. And the final result is that the sound is coming from a special point, a particular point in the space. So, for example, in the past with 7.1, if you place a sound on the back, on the side, you can see in the middle between the side surround. Now you can choose one by one. So active monitor, active speakers, and everything. You can manage up to 64 channels in a theater. And you can divide the audio content into objects and beds. For example, some sounds like ambience, reverberations, music can go to beds. There are basically 5.1 or up to 9.1. An object, for example, a bird or something else that is singing in a precise point in space. So, some words about the architectonic guidelines. Okay, we talked about this Dolby Atmos as a container of object embeds audio contents, and you can see that this Dolby Atmos can be played in cinema, but also in home theater that are completely different audio system from 5.1.2 to 9.1.6 that are completely different to the 64 channels or 100 and something that a speaker that could find in the cinema theater. But I inserted in this picture that to complete content for cinema, you need a cinema mix studio that is basically a small cinema. If you need to complete, if you need to do something about home theater, for example, Formula 1, football, TV series, some shows, something, you need a home entertainment studio that is basically a small home theater, a studio like a small home theater. But the Dolby Atmos content could be reproduced in all these situations in the same time. This is what happens in a cinema. Starting from 7.1, you can see the red speakers. It's typically from a 7.1 configuration. And the blue speakers are the speakers that you have to add to do a Atmos solution. So ceiling speakers, and you have to complete the surround from their end to the front screen. So basically, it seems not to be not so difficult. Of course, you have to change the processor, you have to change the connection, because every speaker have to be controlled up to 64 channels. So it's quite tricky. And what happens to the home theater? Of course, you can choose between different setup from a 5.1 to a 9.1, and you have to add the ceiling speakers. But you have different solutions. You can use overhead speakers, so speakers that are firing from the ceiling, or you can use up-firing speakers that are some transducers that are mounted to the floor speakers and fire to the ceiling, and you can hear the reflection. It seems amazing, it seems strange, but it works quite well for entertainment. And you can choose a combination of down-firing and up-firing speakers. Or you can choose a soundbar. It seems strange, but there are a lot of soundbars that have a lot of technology with up-firing and down and side-firing to complete this idea of surround. Of course, what I I didn't wrote, but is very, very important, is that for all that configurations, you need an auto calibration or a calibration tool, because especially if you work with up firing, you have to calibrate. For example, if you have a lowest ceiling, you hear more reflections than another house that have a higher ceiling. So there are delay compensation, there are a lot of things that you have to control. This is the first and smallest layout of a Dolby Atmos home theater. It's a 5.1.2 downfiring. So we take a traditional 5.1 system, and we add two downfiring speakers on the ceiling. This one is a 5.1.4, where the 4 channels starts from the top of the surround channels, the left, right, and the surround one, up-firing. So these are Atmos-enabled surround speakers up-firing. This is a hybrid solution where you can use a 7.1 using a front ceiling down-firing and the side ceiling up-firing. So Dolby gives also this opportunity. And the last one is 9.1.6 with all down-firing. Maybe this is the biggest solution you can have in a home theater. So it's a lot of speakers. Is a big solution. And this is one of the most famous soundbars. Dolby guys show me in their UK facility, and I was quite impressed. I was with some people from Fox, and listening to this, understood that maybe it's the right time to have Atmos at home, because this is quite easy to install. And of course, it's not a really hi-fi system or something else, but the entertainment is working so well. And if you have a reflective ceiling and reflective sidewall, it works quite well. It gives you the idea to be surrounded. Of course, it's tricky for us because in that case, the room can be very reverberant, so you have to treat the front wall, the back wall, and maybe the floor with carpet or something, because you can't treat the ceiling and the sidewall, otherwise you can hear to the reflection of this soundbar. So this could be nice to understand what happened, because probably we are going in that direction, and maybe we have to think also to some studios that could replicate this experience that is quite different from the downfiring. Dolby guys are quite happy about the experience of upfiring in general, because the reflection is more surrounding. Instead of for small rooms, the downfiring experience could be quite strong, because you can hear the differences between a speaker to another. And the projection on the ceiling are better for a certain point of view. Maybe for entertainment, in a stadium or something else, it could be nice. I was quite impressed. So let's see what happens for a mixing theater, cinema mixing theater. Of course, we have some requirements to respect. The room size is one of the most important with the 8. The room size have to be more than 40 square meter, and the height would be more than 3.6 meter. We have to check an adequate loudspeaker power handling. And for example, in the cinema, we have the central listening area, which is a square in the cinema where we put some microphone to do the test and alignments setup of the room. In this kind of mixing theater, we have the CMA, the critical mix area, which is rectangular that is quite close to the console, the listening position. And it's very important because it's the area where we have to aim all the speakers. These are a lot. So we have to pay attention to this area, where it is, and how to aim the speakers inside. Fortunately, luckily, Dolby gives us, it's not public, but you can ask to them. The Dart is an Excel file. It's a Dolby Atmos room design tool. It's quite complete with a lot of speakers. It gives you power, it gives you infos about dimensions, and so for designers it's quite important to have. So, a few words about the way to design these rooms. The first step is choosing the listening point. That in general is 2/3 of the length because it's the best place from the acoustically. Is the place where the axial mode is in the middle between the maximum and the minimum. You have to choose the screen dimension, and the screen dimension gives you also the elevation of the front speakers, because the acoustic axis have to be at 2/3 of the screen height. Then you have to design this critical mixing area, CMA, and it is correlated to the width of the room in general. So is a formula, and you can have the width of this area, which is the area when the sound engineer could move. And this gives the rules to aim all the speakers. We will see now. You have to draw a 30 angle from the back speaker and the side speakers, and then make the other one horizontally. So you draw the point, and then you go to the vertical section of the room, and you have to alienate them to the acoustic axis of the front wall. Then generally they are put at 2/3 of the room. That is basically 2/3 of the screen, like the axis of acoustic axis of the front wall. Then there are some speakers that have to be aimed perpendicular to the CMA, some other that have to be aimed to the corner of the CMA, and some other that have to be aimed to the listening position. It seems to be difficult, but it's not so difficult. It's quite easy to do geometrically. You can read it carefully in the slides I put on my website if you want, but it is not so difficult, but there are general rules that you have to follow step by step. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to the final result. And after that, you have to draw all the lines between them and make this a sort of net on the ceiling where to put the ceiling speakers. And at the end, a general rule is that the angle between the horizontal plane and the vertical plane of the ceiling speaker have to be 45 degrees plus a half of the angle of the side speaker. This is very important because this is one of the most important rules, because of course you have to rebuild a panorama, a 3D panorama. And if the speaker, the ceiling speaker is too narrow, probably there is too much space between them and the side one. If they are too close to the side one, of course you lose something on the ceiling. So this is a quite important rule to follow. So talking about multi-channel audio standards, yes, we have a lot of them. I don't want to talk about everything, but ITU, AES, SMPTA, EBU, SMPTA. Why I talk now about multi-channel audio standards? Because when we talk about broadcast audio, we talk about ITU, EBU, something. When we talk about cinema, we talk about SMPTA and Dolby in general. So ITU is not so compatible with Dolby in general. So what happens? Of course, ITU, let's have a look. 5.1 is a circle, the same distance between the speakers. The speakers are the same height and everything. Probably you just know about the 5.1. If you talk about two more speakers, ITU, ABU, IS have different ideas, so let's have a break. It's not really, but the 5.1 is okay for everyone. Another important thing that the ITU regulation says, 775, is the bass management and the correct use of LFA and bass management with small speakers. So the subwoofer have to do two things. One is LFE, and another is the bass management, so the crossover of the other front speakers. And this is very important because I see a lot of strange stuff, especially for home theaters. AES gives us some mask about reverberation and frequency response. As you can see, the reverberation is linked to the volume of the room, and this is quite important. So bigger room has bigger optimal reverberation time, longer optimal reverberation time, and the frequency response could be flat. So this is good, but this is another important point different from the cinema, where we use the X-curve SMPT, which is not an equalization target curve, but it is a response that shows up if you measure a loudspeaker with flat response in a large room with a real-time analyzer and peak noise, etc., etc. So what happens in a large room? We have reverberation, air absorption, a lot of phenomena that gives you the dispersion of mid-high frequency, so you hear this loop. So if you're going to mix the same content you have to reproduce in a bigger room like a cinema, but you have to mix in a smaller room like mixing cinema, you have to follow maybe this X-curve or something like this. There is a lot of debate about this X-curve. Somebody is very happy about this, some other are not so happy, and the things are changing. So the problem is, how do the standards evolve? Joining scientific aspects and consumer expectation might result tricky. Yeah, because we have a look at the science, but the market, the industry is not so easy to follow sometimes. So the standard is a design prerequisite and a consumption model. Have to match these two things. The standards have been consolidated with respect to technology innovation. So now this soundbar, everything, you have to follow this trend and the gradual change in public audience expectation and competence. And of course, let's go on. So about Dolby Atmos home entertainment design. This is quite easy because if you look at the cinema design, if you look at the home theater, if you look at the ITU configurations, you merge it together and you check these. You will find these home theater requirements. Of course, you can do these home entertainment requirements. In a small room, the room volume could be more than 28 square cubic meters, so it's really tiny, if you want. It's really, really tiny. Dolby says that rooms with more than 58 cubic meter may be more practical, and I'm really okay with this. Maybe working in smaller room is always a mess for us acousticians, but of course the trend is for these broadcasters having smaller and smaller environment. The idea is that the acoustic treatment is like a control room, so it's not so different from other things, but you have to pay attention because you need to have a lot of sound sources in the room. So maybe if you want to insert some reflections, be careful where you put, and don't use large surface of reflection. There is the possibility to do a studio for up-firing speakers, but I am a little scared about this because I don't see how we acousticians can design a studio with a reflective ceiling parallel to the floor. So I'm a little bit scared about this thing. Let's see what happens in the future. But we have to do something for up-firing systems, of course. So the new Dart for Dolby Atmos home entertainment is quite important to have in the future. Now is quite ready. So basically, what happens? They took the ITU 775. So they start with 5.1, same angles. We insert the back and the mid in back, so 5, 7, 9 if you want. And this is all. Most important thing, and the ITU says this just a few years ago, that the floor speakers have to be at a ear level, so 120 general. Why? Because we don't want to have the ceiling speaker so narrow. So if the floor speakers have to remain at ear level, we don't have to rise a lot the ceiling speakers, but they can be a little bit wider. And this is better for the audio perception because we can feel so much in the center of our head. And so it is better to have a wider ceiling, probably. So ITU standards are closer to the consumer experience for home theater, so Dolby uses them for home theater arrangement. So the speaker height is 120. We have something, we can change something for the back surround, make them a little bit higher if we need. And the ceiling speakers should be from 0.3 to 0.6 of the width of the overall speaker layout. And their height must be 2 to 3 times the floor speaker 120. So they have to be from 240 centimeters to 360. And the angles toward the listening point must be 45. This is the best one. And it could be a little bit adjusted from 30 to 55 if you have to be. Probably these last rules have to be discussed a little bit more. Now we're trying to do things at best at 45 degrees. A few words about calibration. Of course, the calibration should be a little bit less than the cinema, so 82 dBc. LFA plus 10 dB, like ITU, like Dolby. And most important is that for room bigger than 125 cubic meters, that is almost a cinema mixing theater, you should use the X-curve. For a room smaller than 125, the X-curve slope at a higher frequency may be reduced, or the key knee point may be moved up to the 5 kHz or 8 kHz if you want. So the idea is that for a smaller room, we don't need the X curve. For bigger room, we need it, okay? So I will show some case studies. We start from in-house. This is a facility in Rome where they produce original cinema, original film, Italian movie. In particular, they work with Paolo Sorrentino, Oscar winner with the young, The Great Beauty, La Grande Bellezza in Italiano. And this is a 7.1 facility made in an apartment. So it was really tricky for the isolation. The height was not so high. And it was designed during a time where the Atmos begins. So they gave us the opportunity to be Atmos ready, so we can put Atmos in the future, even if probably that speaker should be not so high. So maybe in the future we will design a new studio with the higher speakers and higher ceiling speakers. The nice thing of this facility, you can look at the colors that is gray, is quite black, is that it can be used also as a color correction room. So it is a facility that works almost 16 to 20 hours a day from audio mix and color correction. And this is quite nice, quite a good choice from a commercial point of view. The trickiest part was, of course, making this in an apartment in center town. Mirko Peri is a talented guy, won a lot of awards, David Donatello, and there was produced The Great Beauty, Youth, The Young Pope by Sorrentino, and a lot of other Italian movies. And this is the design. I only found the final things about HVAC, but I could explain you. We have a lot of absorption on the back, on the corner. We use a slat absorber and a diffuser for the back that gives a little bit of brightness. And you can see a sort of sawtooth in the side wall with absorption. And you can see the yellow panel that are reflective panel that raise a little bit of reverberation in the room, but are aimed in a mode that the first reflection doesn't occur from the speakers. So this is the way of working there. Of course, there is the sound wall, so a sort of flush mount of the speakers like happens. The system is a traditional JBL like cinema, and let's see if in the future we can work also with Genelec too. And now I would like to show you these guidelines that we are working with Genelec and Dolby, work in progress, but we want to show you something about different solution, starting from a smaller room to a bigger room, and see what happens, the audio configuration. Let's start with this shape. I will tell you later where this shape came from the Fox experience. We will change probably this shape for this guideline because this is quite particular. But this is a small room, and the reproduction system is a 5.1.2. But we can add 2 more ceiling speakers, so it becomes a 5.1.4. We can add 2 surround speakers, it's a 7.1.4. And finally, we can add 2 more speakers on the back surrounding. So it can be a 9.1.4. So it's a small booth. The listening position is at 2/3 of the length of the room, and this could be all the reproduction system that we can do in this room. If you see in the section, The ceiling speakers was put with a 45 degrees angle, like the norms requires. And that's all. We put a lot of absorption on the back, so this is the main aim. And the idea is to flush mount the speakers, but this is not really mandatory. These are a medium room of about 29, 30 square meters of 96 cubic meters. And we did two solutions of these. This is quite nice because this could be a typical control room for music with more speakers. So the listening position is at 1/3 of the length of the room, like happens in most of the music control rooms. So this is a 5.1.4, and this could be a 7.1.4, inserting two speakers that probably are quite far from the other, but could be aligned with delay and so on. Of course, this is a compromise. But this room can be used in a 2/3 of the length, so more similar to a cinema mixing room and less similar to a music mixing room. With a 7.1.4, you can see that the front angle is changed from 30 plus 30 degrees to about 25, like in the cinema happens. And this could be expanded to 9.1.4. Then, this is the section, the same 45 degrees. The height of the ceiling speakers is from 2 times to 3 times the height of the floor speakers, as the regulation says. And this could be a small cinema mixing room with bigger monitors, Genelec 1238 maybe, and 1032C speakers hanging from the ceiling and the sidewall. Here we don't count the number of speakers anymore because they are too much. But it's a typical mixing room, so it's like a small cinema. And the listening position is at 2/3 of the length. 50 square meter, 119 cubic meter. You can see the difference between the elevation of the side speakers and the ceiling speakers is 57. You have to remember the rule to add 45 plus E half E. So 23 is about 11.5 plus 45 is 56.5. So 57. This is very important because this helps to rebuild the 3D audio panorama. After that, this is a larger room. Is like a theater. Sorry, it's like a theater, a bigger theater. And of course, this is 11 meters, and so this could be a bigger mixing room, like sometimes we have, maybe in Italy we have a few, but okay, a lot of speakers. We can use 1234 or 1236 too, with the front speakers. The same rule about the angle of the ceiling and the side speakers. Oh, this was one of the trickiest parts. Last thing I would like to show you is our Fox experience. Is since 2014 that we work with the Pro Audio Consulting, our partner for building and construction, with Fox. The first work we do together is the Fox UK. They have to move all the facility from Fox to for the old facility, to the new one. And the new one is in Hammersmith, London. And the problem was the space, because we have a tiny space in the entire place, surrounded by the offices. So we have a few places to work, and we make very tiny room with three-way speakers, front speakers. And it was a challenge, because make them something well was really, really tricky, but we use a lot of space and angles to do the right absorption and the flash mount and everything. So this Nat Geo studio, where a lot of National Geographic documentaries was made and voiceovered in that facility. There is another room where they work with in particular for series. And it was a challenge, because all around this island of studios, there was the office, and a crowded office, open office with a lot of people that came and go around. So isolation was tricky, but the problem was the space. So we tried to find a shape that could optimize the audio system diagram. And we find this kind of shape, sharing this small vocal booth and making this entrance like a sound lock, because the problem, we fear that in the sound booth could be something from the corridor, from the open office. So we use this entrance room like a distribution room, and it works quite well. The room are well protected, and yeah, everyone was very happy about this solution. So they was so happy that would like to replicate this shape in Munich, but we had a bigger place. So mainly, the most important difference is that we 8351 was out, so we used them instead of 1238, three-way, okay, and maybe printing on the fabric, but it's quite the same. Of course, when you work for broadcaster, you always have to brandize the things, so they're very happy about this possibility to make personal the static part. And now we are working in Rome for Fox Rome. And this is a huge facility because until now Fox was linked to Sky in northern part of Rome in a modern building, but now Sky moved to Milan and Fox remained alone in Rome, so they rented a old palace in center town. Very nice palace in the third floor. In the first floor and the second floor there will be the Apple store, and so it's quite tricky because we have to pay attention to the insulation, a lot of things, and it's challenging. The work started 2 weeks ago. The design seems to be similar, but it's quite different, starting from the isolation, because here we need a lot of more isolation, so we use a hybrid solution between masonry, concrete, and plasterboards lightworks. Because the rooms are so many, so they have to be well separated each other, low frequency, of course, and because we have Apple Store and every other things around. The other problem is that we have 4 rooms, and of course now is the reason why I'm talking about. There is the Atmos home entertainment. So the reason is that Sky is moving to Dolby Atmos, and they need this kind of new technology for their home their own studios where they produce and supervise contents that comes from other party. So this is the basic layout, and it's similar to what I shown before. This is a 9.1.4. So we use a lot of space in the corner in the back as absorption, and the front would be flush mounted. The speaker, we use the flush mounted kit of Genelec to flush mount them. So we use every single corner to maximize the absorption in the room. So it's a small room, but the problem is always the same, is the absorption of low frequency. So wait a minute. There is, it's very high. This next slide. Okay. These are some PDF from the section of the rooms. And there are different rooms. They are similar to the acoustic design, but are different in shape. There are Brandeis, Fox Crime, National Geographic, Fox Life, and everything. We do a lot of work of absorption on the ceiling. Here is not particular, but we have baffles on the ceiling. And we have some reflective panels too that works, but not so many because, of course, we cannot do a lot of reflection there. So we insert a diffuser in the back, slab diffuser, but not only solid, because of course we cannot do very huge reflective surfaces. So this is the best solution we found, and the Fox guys want to implement some Korean retro-illuminated stuff to have something aesthetical surprises in the room. And so we use, of course, the one Genelec basically for three reasons. The first one is that they are really point source speakers, and here we need it because we need a speaker that have to be very, very precise from a spatial point of view. The second reason is that, of course, they sound well. And the third reason is that that could be flush mounted, and that could be controlled by the GLM, which is really, really important when you use a lot of speakers like this. This is insulation, work a lot with masonry and plasterboard. We made room in room, of course, is quite different. Bel design Italiano, which means the old Italian design came from the 50s, so this rounded surface and other stuff that was taken from things like 2001 Space Odyssey or Apple or something else is. And we combine all the style with all the style of the facility with the Fox design team. Was not so easy, but we made nice work together. So these are the renders of the studio that we are going to finish now. This is the Fox Core studio. This is Fox Crime, of course, with this Korean red lightning behind. And this is the Fox Life. And the last one is the Nat Geo with the square of the perfect ratio logo of National Geographic channel. We have also some ISO booths because they have to record voices and instruments. We do a parametric work for these wave-shaped panels on the ceiling and on the back. This is because the rooms are not so big, but we need some diffusion, and at the same time, we have to maintain a low reverberation time, of course. And a few conclusions about this, all the stuff I say you. Sorry for this 2 hours presentation. I hope you enjoyed. One thing that I just suggest you is that there are some difference between up-firing and down-firing. We have too many speakers in the room, it's true. We have to pay attention to this, it is true. We have to check all the reflection as acoustician, but we have to think about this difference between up-firing and down-firing, because with up-firing, it is a more sustained ambience feeling. With down-firing, we have more precise origin of sound. So maybe the standard have to go in a direction, and maybe we have to understand how to build new studios for this kind of technology. So this is tricky. So we have some open questions. What consumers shall expect from industry in the coming years? I don't know. We have a lot of channels. Probably all the broadcasts will go in immersive audio. Is the immersive multi-channel audio only for cinema and TV? I don't know. Probably, for sure, TV goes on 3D audio with soundbars and everything. I'm a little bit... I fear that I probably know that the music will remain in stereo. So this could be a good thing and a bad thing, because I would like that the music industry will be moving, because if you think about audio, the audio for music is still at CD quality, 16 bits. So maybe it could be a good idea to remain at stereo standards, but maybe I hope that something will happen in the music industry. Maybe multi-channel is not the way, but we have to do something. I'm a musician, so I'm very linked to this kind of industry. But the fact is that the music industry and the cinema and broadcast have completely two velocity now, two speeds, different speeds. So let's see what happens in the future. Okay, thank you, goodbye. You will find the presentation PDFs on my website if you want. I'm honored to be here, and I hope you enjoyed. We are not so many, but I hope it was hard, but I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye, I have to come home.